Hello, my name is Geonna Snyder, and this is how to make a small fake cut with scar wax. First, we're going to start off by grabbing some of our scar wax. We're going to need a metal sculpting tool for this. One that has an end sort of like this that comes to a point, but also on the side has a rounded edge. Let's grab our scar wax. You're not going to need much for this. Before we put this in our fingers, let's put this on the table and grab a bit of lotion. You're not going to need much lotion, but you just really don't want this to stick everywhere other than on the spot that you actually want it to. So we're just going to put it onto our fingertips. Take your scar wax, and we're going to heat it up. Move it around in your fingers, and draw out a very small line with it. So we're going to use our fingers to pull it. While you're pulling it, use your fingers to move it around and roll it. If any pieces of your scar wax end up folding or falling off, you can just put it back on and press it. That looks pretty good. Let's put that off to the side, back on our scar wax container. And now we're going to put a bit of adhesive down where this is going to go. You're going to need some sort of cotton swab. Usually I prefer these ones that are along the lines of a Q-tip that have cotton on both ends. The type of adhesive that I'm using is Prozade. And you don't want to directly stick your finger into this because you don't want to contaminate it, especially now that we have lotion on it. So we're just going to dip this into the material. You won't need too much, but make sure you cap this before you go too much further. I'm leaning that against a metal tool so it doesn't get all over the table. You want to make sure that this is capped before you continue the makeup, only because you don't want this to spill everywhere. This gets really sticky and it's very hard to remove from surfaces once it dries. Now let's figure out exactly where we want to put it. I want to put it on this finger here. I'm going to take my Q-tip and I'm going to go from where the nail bed is all the way down to this knuckle here. Now I'm going to take my scar wax and place it on top of the adhesive. Before I do that though, I'm just going to roll this a bit more and have it come to a point at both ends. This looks like it's going to be just a bit longer than where I have the adhesive, but that's okay because we'll sculpt it at the end. Starting off with the nail bed, I'm sticking this down and moving to where that knuckle is. Now I'm using my finger just to gently put it into place. And where the adhesive is down, it should stick, but I'm going to pull on it now and the rest of the material should come off. Make sure to save any extra material, you can always use it later. Now that I have this down, I'm going to get the end to a bit of a point. And I'm just doing that by pinching and pulling. The adhesive helps to keep the scar wax in place and it'll really grip to it. Now where the nail is, I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to pull upwards. Now that we have that down, let's take our finger and smooth out the sides. Do this by applying a bit of pressure and pulling down. Now we're going to go onto the other side and smooth it out as well. Now to even out the edges, let's take our sculpting tool, the same one that we ended up taking the scar wax out with. Clean off the edge, use another one of your fingers to do so. Because this is a blunt sculpting tool, it's more than okay. But if you do have an edge to your tool, make sure you're using a cloth or an extra piece of paper. You don't want to accidentally cut yourself. Now that our edge is pretty clean, we can go and smooth this out. I'm starting at the top of my finger and moving this down. Now for the other side, I'm doing the same thing. Now we can move on to one of our other sculpting tools. This one that I'm using has a small point at the end, and it's going to make it easy to get a small cut in the center. Starting at the nail, we're going to go down all the way to where the end is. Use a very small amount of pressure. You might have to go either upwards or downwards if any of the scar wax starts to pull. What I'm doing is I'm using a very small tapping motion to make a line in the center. I'm going all the way down to the end. And if the line that you made is too thick, what you can always do is take the sides and push them together. There's a small amount of scar wax that got into my finger. I'm going to remove it with this tool. At the edge, I'm pinching and moving up. It also looks like this is still raised a good amount, so I'm going to go back over to the edges and smooth it down a bit more. If it still looks like it's raised a bit too much, you can take your finger and just press down slightly on it. That's going to help to flatten some of the edges. That looks good. Now in the center, we're going to take some water-activated cosmetic, and we're going to draw a black line. I'm using a thin brush to do so. You're not going to need much for this, but I want to create a shadow in the center. Use the tip of the brush and pull downwards. Now we can take a finger and get some red powder onto it. This is going to make it look like it's a bit aggravated at the edges. Make sure your finger is clean and dry. Take your finger, wipe off a little bit of the extra powder onto your hand, and that should be good. Now we're going to take our finger and we're going to tap it on the surface. And that's just going to put a bit of redness on there. Now let's wet our brush again and let's use some red water-activated cosmetic. Just like we did for the center before, we're going to go in with the red now. I'm also going to take this and put a bit into the corner of where my finger is, all the way up to the top of the nail right about here. Before we get too much further, there's a little bit of shine that I see that are at the edges. I'm going to use some translucent setting powder. I'm going to take this, turn this to the side, and tap it a few times. Now I can take one of my fingers that doesn't have any cosmetic on it and grab some of the powder to take off some of the shine. If there's shine on the entire piece, you can always use a makeup brush instead of your finger. There's only a little bit of shine on the sides though for this, so I'm only using my finger. Now we can move on to some fake blood. Let's clean our brush. And depending on the type of fake blood that you're using, you can always use it off of the applicator, or you can use a paintbrush. Now we're going to follow this in the center as to where we put everything else. I'm following up the side as well. And if you wanted to at the edges to make it look like there's some fake blood over the side, you can take your finger and tap on it. And now you know how to make a fake cut with scar wax? And if you want to learn more, check out my makeup course on domestika.org.